93, got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure and honor to speak to a brother or sister that's doing exceptional work in every field of human endeavor. And they share their God stories, the ways in which God has been at work in their life and the ways in which God has been at work in their work, man. And fam, I am so excited about this conversation because, it's one thing to be on this side. We were chatting a little beforehand. Another thing to get the people who are usually on this side on the other side, right? And so I'm excited to introduce and have our brother, your brother, Mr. Alan Stowe II. What's going on, King?
Hey, what's going on, man? How you feeling?
Man, I'm good, man. Like I said, Ohio's in the building. Man. And Ohio from Columbus, Akron, obviously. This is an evergreen conversation, so we're not going to talk too much LeBron. I don't know if there's salt here, but we ain't going to talk about that. But I want to shout out to you, man. And I don't want to waste too much time, man, because I always am intrigued by storytellers. Those who see the power of media, those who are not afraid of media, but they who have been creative, both in terrestrial media, which I think is bread and butter, that you have helped to steward the thoughts, the morning thoughts in some cases, obviously the day thoughts of people. You have been contributing kind of to their ethos because they already self-select and listen in to something. For you to be a mind behind the programming that people get to listen to, right, over time. For you to be the mind about how to actually best illustrate as a designer, right? Best illustrate concepts, brands, messages, and the like. But also for you to be someone who's also creating content yourself and helping people to understand or helping unblock people along the way. Now, I'm keeping it very high level because I think you have a pretty considerable resume from radio, online, urban one. You've done a lot, and I think people have come to know you beyond Ohio. But I'm gonna jump in. Just want to set the stage so people understand just the excellence that we're talking to today. But I want to set the stage a little bit and say, man, I think that this is a timely conversation because I think that media, beyond the brands and the conversation around spending and the like, is here. But I think seeing men navigate that and their perspective on it from a gospel lens is powerful. So, bro, who is Alan Stowe II?
Yeah, it's funny. I get asked that more often than typical. Honestly, I know I do a lot, but who I am at my heart is truly a servant. And I would be a liar if I said I always known that, because I always thought who I was what I do. And, and just growing and maturing and understanding that what you do is not who you are, will give you a different perspective in how you serve in what you do. So I'm definitely, I'm a servant of God that has been given specific gifts to build his kingdom. And those gifts just so happen to fall in the lines of, media, broadcasting, and marketing, and writing,
everyone, like everything.
Like, I know I am supposed to be in creative spaces, just point blank period. I'm supposed to be a creator, and that's just what I'm called to do. So at the end of it, whatever task I'm given, it's going to be some creative element behind it.
Bro, this is I love this piece because this is a hard one, man. I think for many people, figuring out what they're good at, there's a difference between good at, gifted at, and then from the gifted at to this is a call. But depending on what your thinking is the framework that if I'm gifted, I must do this. And then that's just a piece. There's another piece of identity, which you started with, which is just saying being able to separate your identity from what you did. I'm always curious about the genesis of things, man, because like when did you fall in love with stories, or when did you kind of recognize that? Because I think that's that's so difficult for so many people. Like, yo, like, how did I know that this was something I should pursue as opposed to a hobby, or I just happen to like this, like vanilla ice cream versus chocolate ice cream? When did you fall in love with storytelling early?
Man, well, I loved, writing stories and creating stories ever since, at least like the fourth grade. When the teacher was like, yo, we need you all to write. Like, I vividly remember we were given an assignment to write a creative story. She said, anything you want. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I started writing mine, and I get like the first page done. So she's walking around. Shout out to Miss Markwood.
Shout out, teachers.
She comes and checks on mine because she saw I was just going. And so she stops me and wants to read mine. And she said, oh, I got to share this with everybody. So she reads, like, I wasn't even done with the story. She just reads the beginning of my creative story to the whole class. And why that was so impactful for me, because at that point in my life, Miss Markwood was the best storyteller ever. Like, she's the only teacher, because we had story time in class. She would read to us. She was the only teacher that would play every character in the book. Like, like, it's mind. So I'm looking at her like just fascinated. Like, I'm talking about, she would create a voice. Like, she would become the character while reading the story, and it was just the most fascinating, entertaining thing ever. So I admired that. So for her to take my story and implement it during that time, I'm like, yo, I think I can be good at this. But then maturing and knowing that, like, this is what I need to do, because the writing was a gift that I knew I had. But when I got into broadcasting, like, it took me a few years even to be in this to realize, like, yo, you are still telling stories. I'm on the radio, and I definitely love that, but my passion is video. Like, because when you can see something in motion, and like, cause video is nothing but motion pictures. Like, it's literally individual pictures.
It's funny how you say that. Like, I think for some people, they're like, oh yeah, like, it makes sense. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, like, there is literally still frames sped up to tell a story. Right. And so, like, the fact that I can, they talk in broadcasting, we have the theater of the mind. Like, I can edit something a certain way to create an impact on somebody that's watching or listening. And I've just seen the evolution of, even me editing. Like, I've grown to not only, shoot things better, edit things better, but just in the storytelling is in the details. Or as a listener or as a reader, that you don't consciously realize unless you study what you're interacting with. Why you cried at this video is really because of the soft music that was playing behind that story. Like, if the story dry, you'd be like, dang, that's messed up. But because violin and
that little Hans Zimmer come through at the right time, you understand? That Ludwig Göransson come through at the right time. You feeling this, bro, this is perfect, man, because one, I think even when people hear about movies being made and they talk about post, and it's like, oh gosh, we gotta wait for all this stuff. But it's just like, no, up front is the raw. You don't even understand maybe the days, and you get 2 hours, but they probably did it in how many 10 after, and how much of just how just important that is in telling the story. Two, even just the daily news, right? You know, be able to tell the story. You're taking all this raw, right? And I think what's universal for, I think, even professionals in anything is that I think sometimes sales gets a bad rap, but to some degree, you're telling a story that you're trying to captivate somebody into a narrative and an understanding, right? So whether you're selling a story about a company that you're building and you're painting a picture about how the future, how the world can be with this, people are entering a story. So I just wanted to pause just so people just see the magnitude of that. But even the fact that you could realize it retroactively, right? You had a couple of years before you fully understood that. That's real. But I almost, man, I have to ask this because I think this is so rich. This piece of, okay, I recognize I'm good. I was able to get some external validation from my teacher and then perhaps from my reaction of my classmates. And then what usually people miss is then like the process of like, was there resistance? Was it in the household? Like, how could you make a living? Like, how did you get from there to like, okay, now I'm in broadcast pieces. Tell me about that. Was it cultivated? Was it a fight? Like, what was that journey like?
It's an ongoing journey. So like, it was wild, like because I went to a trade school, so I specifically studied radio and television broadcasting. And, you know, they told us, like, the very first day they told us, you're going to get out what you put in. Like, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, like, but
to see it lived out was something totally different. And I always was just all in, because to me, like, I thought this was my last chance at anything anyway. So it's like, you got my all from day one. But to, like, you know, miss class or miss assignments or, you know, give half effort, it's like, oh, well, you are getting, you know, and either way, it's going to be a fight. But I'd rather fight, you know, being seen than not even showing up to the fight. You know what I mean? And so for me, you know, like, doing free work was the big fight. And I knew we were probably in class for 3 months, and 3 months in, like, everybody was like, oh no, Stowe's that dude. And that was a great feeling, but, you know, that didn't stop me, or, you know, like, I didn't settle for that. Like, I can't best in this class, then I really suck. Like, I'm really. So I know, but even though I know I've surpassed people in my class, like, okay, what's next? So I'm doing good on internships. I graduate top of my class, everything. And then that day after graduation, it was like, you still don't got a job. Like, you back to where you started on day one. Like, yo, so continue to, and this, what I've learned too is, like, I was putting my confidence in the wrong source.
Break that down, bro. Break that down.
Okay, so
we get it, but I'm just like, for these people who don't speak that language, you know what I'm saying, talk to us.
So my whole goal was, like, I have to be in front of these people. I have to impress these people. I have to do these work so these people can give me the opportunity that I'm, like, yearning for. Like, I know I'm good enough for this. And of course, you know, everything's a learning process. And I just look back on that now, like, man, I was fighting for something that was really empty at the time. And instead of really relying on God and guidance from him, like, I was trying to get more validation from man. my, immature mind could register. And that goes back to Mrs. Markwood's class. Like, she gave me the green light to like creating stories. Then I go to, off to the college, and everyone in my class is like, Stowe. Every man, every being in my class is like, yo, Stowe, you good at this. You should go do X, Y, and Z. Then I'm on my internships and looking for validation from people to go to the next level. In none of those processes did I seek God to say, like, yo, what should I do? Or like seek him for praying that this opens. Like, if I prayed that something opened, maybe he would have, made the necessary moves. I think a lot of times we underestimate, and I don't mean to go off, but
no, this is perfect.
We underestimate the partnership we have with God. Like sometimes God will not move unless we grant him the access to move. I have multiple business partners, and I fully know, like, if I don't communicate with them, then what we're trying to execute collectively cannot happen.
That is, but you making it plain in a way, like it's like the common sense of like the motion pictures. It's almost an extension of like, well, if this is my father's business and I'm trying to be about it, why wouldn't I consult him in the work, right? Because I think this piece, man, I think I want to even double down even more on this, because I think this is something that's so elusive, I would say, for many people, which is, what does that practically look like? And perhaps you spelled it out, right? Like, there's one sense of saying, okay, one way that God does communicate to all of us is sometimes through the people. They say, okay, there's a response. Okay, so this is beyond me. Okay, there could be some fruit in that. So that gets the things going. But to your point, how does it then practically transition? Was it just I just need to have the conversation with God? But then after you have the conversation with God, some people would argue that you then go back to, now I'm waiting on someone else to validate the movement of God. So you piece that together for somebody who's kind of like, I'm struggling with figuring out, this path, and my view, like you have been, like, whether people give me validation or not. But now when I speak to God, how does it change? How does the response change in terms of how you know that this is the right path or not?
Yeah. So there's a there's a couple of responses that come to mind when that. This morning I was talking to one of my friends, and in my my prayer time this morning, God laid on my spirit for me to seek his well done more than man's good jobs. Like, whether you're at work or wherever you do perform at with, man, if you have a boss or whatever, like, they're going to, like, every 2 weeks you get a good job, or attaboy, like, here's your check. Or, or you'll get recognized in a meeting, or even if they write an article, whatever you get that man can tangibly provide you. Like, that's cute until you don't see any progression from that. And if that is always your focus, like, I didn't even get recognized by such and such and such and such. Like, you're going to fight a battle that is not worth fighting. So God, in Colossians 3 talks about, do your and your deeds and your work, do it in the name of Christ Jesus. And it's like, if that is not your motivation, then you're going to continue to feel like you're waiting on God to validate something through man. And it's like,
ooh, run that back, double that, run that back. That hit me, because like, run it back, mean, in a way, so somebody who's not even rocking with Christ understand, bro, run that back. I got that. That hit me.
So if I would break it down to this. If you looking for your mama to say, go forth and do X, Y, and Z, and God did not speak to your mom, or God is not going to use your mom, then your focus is going to be on the wrong thing. Because God, if you diligently seek God on purpose, he's going to give you a word, or the response that you see that you don't force is going to be a reflection of what you asked for.
Fam, this,
you don't have to force anything to happen, because we get caught up sometimes in we use prayer or communication with God as a checklist item instead of an action item, that we get caught up in not and still doing things on our own. It's like, okay, they told me to pray, check, I did it, but here I'm going to go and do it myself anyway. Like, no, like, pray and wait for that response, but that doesn't mean to stand still and wait forever either. Because if we go back to Abraham, God was not able to speak to Abraham until everything that was distracting him died. Because if you read Genesis 11, it talks about the journey of Abraham and his family. And then you flip the page to Genesis 12, it says, now. The first word in Genesis 12 says, now God can speak to Abraham. Now that his brother's dead, his daddy's dead, the idols that they were worshiping were around them were dead. Now God could have that clear one-on-one communication with Abraham.
This is, I think this is just palpable. I'm always, it translates. I think people get what you're saying. And I think it's so timely, because I think sometimes it's people try to figure out God, like, what's the formula for me to figure out when I should do, how I must do it, when I must do it. And sometimes it requires an intentionality and also a patience. And then, like, actually it brings your faith alive, right? Do I believe that he will speak? So if I don't really believe, then I'm not going to wait, because I don't think something's coming, versus I just trust that he is. I'm curious, because even as you speak of it with a very refreshing humility about, you not being sure, and then you getting to this place of, okay, now I find this opportunity, and now what's actually motivating me in this, because I didn't know the source. And now you're kind of now in this place of, I now find an opportunity. I now am doing work that I appreciate, that I think is good and cool. But when did, like, even in the midst of you, just getting in radio, when did kind of you feel like God challenged you or challenged your faith in a real way, where you had to kind of depend on him? Because let's say that you arrived. Like, some people would say, look, your path leading up to this point, the milestones have been hit. You are now in radio. You are now in programming. You are now doing what you're called to do. Hooray, victory. Well, how had God had to show up or work for you in ways that kind of really was just like, woo, God, I need this?
Yeah, I think, for the past, almost 11 years, I can say that I've been in media and broadcasting. And God has allowed me to stay in this industry, in this lane, in some type of capacity for that time. And I think, to answer your question, that time where I was challenged was when I was working at I was working at the school I graduated from. So I was the education coordinator. So I assisted in the education office and to ensure, curriculum was good, students graduated and things like that. But there was still the education director and the school director ahead of me that I reported to. And so during that time, like, decisions were being made that I didn't necessarily agree with. And this is where I took my gifts for granted, because I knew I could just show up to work, slack off, and still be okay. And because I did not agree with decisions being made, that's like the way I was moving for a minute, and just not doing the best I could do. And because things weren't moving the way I wanted them to, things weren't moving in my timing, things weren't, manifesting the right way. And I was just like, I probably need to start, thinking about moving on elsewhere, because there's nowhere for me to grow here. And and God with me, he hits me in all of a sudden ways. Because I was in the hallway of the school one day, after I just got done complaining to another coworker about something. I left their office and I was in the hallway, and as clear as day, God said, "Shut up and work." Like, to the point where I was like, who are you talking to? But as clear as day, he said, "Shut up and work." Meaning, quit your complaining, get out of this woe is me. Like, who cares if things ain't going your way? Just do your job that that you're supposed to do to the potential you can do it at. I'm like, and even then I'm like, I'm obedient, because it was undoubtedly God speaking. Like, it wasn't my conscience, because that's not even what I was thinking about. And so I just said, okay. And I got back to it. And long story short, within a month, I was then running the school.
Man. Oh man, this is for somebody, man. This is for somebody.
Bro, you talk about God doing a sudden work, bro. Like, the sudden work God does in your life can elevate you to levels you weren't even thinking about. Like, I'm just thinking about, like, I just want a couple more dollars and a little bit more responsibility and a little bit more say so. Like, that's all I'm thinking. But his word says that he exceeds what we can think or imagine. And I'm telling you, like, the details of how that happened was all of a sudden. And that's a great testimony, a great thing going on. But then at the same time, outside of work, going through the most challenging times in my marriage ever. So I'm like, what? Am I supposed to be happy or not? And I'm like, yo, what? And now looking back, it's just God doing two works at the same time. He's showing me, like, I can elevate you. Like, even our request, like, God, I just don't think he can, like, meet our request exactly. Like, God can't not do extra, like,
Yo, we always say, man, he fed the 5,000, but there was still fish and bread left over. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. He always, like, there's always going to be more. A surplus is abundance is the character of God. Man, this is, I think that's a beautiful picture, right, of this, because I think, shout out, I think, even the times that we're living in, for better or for worse. But I think that, people know that I'm gonna be out of here spirit. Like, everybody know that, you know what I mean? You know what? Just like, let me just, right? And we're all guilty of it, right? We're all guilty of it. You're upset. Things ain't moving the way they need to be, and justifiably so. justified by God's standards, everything. Like, yo, this is not it. I'm looking for the next move, da da da. And so naturally, you feel justified in, packing it in a little bit. And then, but little did you know, right? I have to ask you this before we kind of move on, because I think this is sometimes what misses people is, I think my sister, shout out to Whitney Wood, actually we had a conversation. You talked about like, how does God's voice, for people like God spoke to you, right? And, and obviously God speaks in multiple ways when you talk about communication, providential circumstance, the word of God, Holy Spirit, all godly counsel. But how did you hear it? Like, if you had to explain this in the best way, she said like, it was almost like hearing a voice that was clearly, it was in my voice, but it clearly didn't come from me. Like, how did you describe hearing from God? Like, what was that moment in detail?
Yeah, very similar. I had a elder at my church that broke this down. But because you have your voice, the enemy's voice, and then the voice of God. Mm. And three totally different voices. And for me, when I know it's God's voice, is when he says something that disrupts what I'm naturally feeling in the flesh.
Ooh, man.
Because like I was telling with the example at the school, like I'm on a whole different thought path of like, I'm about to get up out of here. Thing that's going on. I know I can get away with what I'm doing, and if things fall apart, it really won't be my fault. And when he said, "Shut up and work," that's one statement that disrupted the months of aggravation.
And this is in your mind. This is in your, like, obviously you're a Christian, we talk about it, but this is like in your mind, you heard something or you heard that sense.
Yeah. Like you literally hear it. And I understand what people like can come to say like that they don't hear God or they can't tell when God is speaking. And that's just like hearing it in your own self is just one way. Mm. You were seeing God, like God's speaking isn't always a voice or his words. Like sometimes it is the action, just his presence in the actions that take place in your life. Mm-hmm. Or if you start diving into the details of what took place, you're like, oh, he's reflected right there.
Yeah. This is so valuable. It's very valuable. I like anytime people talk about speaking God, because I think so many people miss out, right? They think that God is not speaking because their view is that this is the James Earl Jones voice coming out the mountain, when in some sense, smoke billowing, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, but there is a way that God does speak to each of us in a way that we would understand if we are paying attention and sensing or looking for it, or perhaps even when we're not. And to your point, I think that's a helpful framework for people. Speaking of mind and God speaking in the mind, I think one of the things that I find about you and your journey is you spend a lot of time, even when you kind of just construct a narrative and you tell the narrative of your story, you spend a lot of focus on mindset, thinking, right? The importance of thinking. And we see a lot of this, particularly when people even talk about issues of financial literacy, wealth, and then taking a gospel lens of it. It says it doesn't matter if people give you money or not. If your mindset towards money is not redeemed and really put in a healthy place, it doesn't matter how much money you'll have an unhealthy relationship to it. So I would say, one, kind of post these experiences where you're seeing God moving, when did you get a sense that there was a call to kind of shake up the mindset of others around? When that becomes part of the work, and how do you kind of incorporate that in kind of your day-to-day work, thinking about that mission?
Yeah, I think like when it happened was when I wrote my first book. So when me and my wife started dating, it's so funny because my wife and I are a perfect match because of how different we are.
Say it again for the people in the back.
We are a perfect match because of how different we are.
Oh man, what were you thinking? Go ahead.
So she, like, cause her upbringing was totally different than mine. Like her family traditions were different than mine, and some of the things that she was exposed to, you know, I wasn't, and vice versa. And so, like, we would just have these conversations about how she would process and think about things, or how her friends would process and think about things. I'm like, that's how they think.
Oh man, yo, shout out! It's all love, man. It's all love, man. We just speaking in love, y'all. Continue.
Yeah. Well, you know, and we would just have conversations, but like, well, have you ever thought about it this way? And a lot of it was, for me, was playing sports. And you know, growing up playing sports, like my dad told me right away, like, you know, it's 90% mental, 10% physical. You know, and if you look at, you know, great athletes today, you know, that's a testament. Like, even though LeBron spends $1 million a year on his body, like he spends priceless amount to get his might for every game. You know, kind of just, you know, apply that to life. Like, I don't have to do something physically every day in life to make impact happen or make results. I can just change my mind, and that will change my approach, and then that will create the impact that favors me. And so from my first book really rimmed from a joke that I, you know, from me and my wife talking. And then what really hit me is my plan was to, you know, write a book in life, just to say I wrote a book. And I was going to do it, you know, when I got old and some time on my hands. And I went to lunch with one of my business partners who she had just published a book at that time. And I was like, yeah, you know, I wanted to do that, you know, just as, you know, like a retirement project or something like that. And she said, yo, Stowe, you being real selfish. I said, wait a minute now, I'm paying for your lunch.
Yeah, hold up now.
Right. I was like, what do you mean? And she said, you have no idea if you're going to be old and retired and be able to write that book. Like, if it's right now, just write it right now. I said, yo. And then 6 months later, I published my first book, What Were You Thinking? The Guide to Becoming a New Thinker.
Sky blue cover with the red face.
That book made, you know, and I don't write books to be a New York bestseller. Like, I self-publish all my stuff. And it's just, I make it known that it's available and whoever wants it can have it. But I'm not looking to get rich off of writing books. Now I enjoy to do it. But the impact that book had was, like, caught me off guard because my mom is my editor. And so, because I like, and this is the other thing, if you want to be good at something, you got to surround your people that tell you the truth. Whether good or bad. And the reason why I chose my mom as an editor, not only because she has, you know, her degree in education, but I know my mom ruffles my feathers more than anybody. Like, she knows how to get to me more than anybody. And I know I needed that for this book to be presented well. And so, like, she was going through each chapter, each line, questioning this question. I mean, down to commas and semicolons and word choice. And I felt myself getting upset, but then I'm like, remember, this is why you would. So we get done with the editing process, and she was like, so she's out of editor. So I'm thinking she's out of editor mode and in mom mode now. She's like, this was a really good book. I really enjoyed reading it. I was like, okay, that's cute. You're supposed to say that. And she was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I just put in my 2 weeks at my job. Okay, that's not the goal of the book.
You're like, whoa. So, hey man, I ain't liable for this. I should have put a disclaimer. Did you put that in there? Yeah.
Right. And so she's like, no, let me explain. Like, in reading, like literally through reading your book, it started making me think differently about me and the position I've put myself in, and how I've limited myself to just what I've been given. So she said I made myself available for other opportunities, and now I've just been offered a job that's paying me, substantially amount more than what she was being paid, and going to give her the position that she had been fighting for over 5 years. They're going to give her that walking in the door. But she said, if I never would have thought to make myself more available, if I didn't change my thinking of how I position myself, I never would have gotten that. I was like, yo.
When you get the mom, because you hear the story. I mean, even when, shout out to, Sarah Jakes telling the story about when her father read her book. And he was just like, when he said it, it was kind of like, I know because he tells me the truth. And so coming from him, she knew it was real.
Yep.
Right. And so similar to you. So I think that this is why truth tellers are so important. I think it's kind of like, it's like the enemy, like they multiply kisses, right? It's the beauty of having people, or like flattery, like people of having people around who see you, but who see who your highest design, and and both action, the things that you create. I think that keeps you centered, and I think you get your best, and I think that's a beautiful thing for life, right? To have people who are lovingly, I think, hurt you, but not injure you when necessary, but tell you the truth, and I think it's cutting. But to your point, it was something that you really saw the impact. And to you, the power of a life change. I know we're coming to a close here, man. I heard a message last week, and shout out to Bishop Rodriguez, Bishop, who has been amazing to me and caring for me, but talking about just sometimes we lose sight of service in like what we're called to do. We're all called to serve, and then everything else kind of comes down from that. And I think there are people perhaps listening to this and watching this that I think your view of impact, to your point, is this validation thing, like are these people, versus do we ever keep metrics and KPIs on lives changed? One life changed. And so the fact that you wrote that book and you saw your own mother, like life change, brother, that's had to be an outer body experience to feel that. And that had to feel supernatural. But I do think that's a message for people around. Sometimes it's like, man, it means that one child, and maybe in this season, the life change for you as a mom was the child that you are dedicated to right now in this season. That's one life changed, right? The work that you're doing, but it's helping that one young man, young boy, but it's like a life change. That has intergenerational impact, man. One to many, from Abraham to many, sand and stars in the sky. I think that is just something that we lose sight of too much. Brother, man, like, I'm going to ask this of you, because I think being in radio, being on the side where you are producing and putting content out in the world, there's this piece of, I always ask, shout out my brother DeTavio at Revolt, where we talk about like, there's the message, there's like the medium, right? Okay, this is the medium and then there's the message, right? How have you thought about just the content that comes from you the content that you're around in your work. Because I think for many people to say, for be exceptional, I may be putting myself in mediums that put out messages that I'm not aligned with, but this is able to give me opportunity to influence a culture that desperately needs some light, right? How have you thought about just the places where you played strategically, understanding kind of the big call for us, right? To kind of just really be kind of bringing God's message, redemption out into the world. Sometimes literally, sometimes in just the element of the excellence that people are showing. So how do you think about that? What's your framework, because you're in radio, because you do this work? How have you thought about that over your career?
Yeah. For me, it's like you got to be 100% comfortable being who God made you to be. No matter what arena he puts you in or the audience that's in that arena. I've, being a director of a school, I've had one-on-one conversations that have impacted lives that I know for sure. But then guys also put me in arenas full of 20,000 students. It's like, there's no telling who who heard or saw something, and I think we have to understand the definition of what we operate in. So to break that down a little bit is, we should be humble, but we should not be humble to a point where we're humiliated. So when we are humble, this means that we are taking up the assigned God-given space. It is it would be humiliating. It's like, so for instance, if I downplayed the fact that I'm on air 7 days a week, how can people see the light in that?
Oh,
but it's the fact that I'm proud to be on air 7 days a week on the only gospel station in Columbus, and can say, but where people mess up at that point is they give themselves the credit for creating that space. I know I'm not here because of me. Yeah, I filled out the application. Yeah, I submitted the demo. Yeah, I had, connections within the company, but at the end of the day, God is the one that made the room. So who am I to be ashamed of or downplay of where I am? And I just think, that's just how I roll. Is I'm going to maximize the space that God gives me so he can expand the space he gives me. We talk, with the prayer of Jabez, we traditionally, we'll pray that. So, we'll get more houses, we'll get more cars, this, and this. If you get a 10-bedroom house, only use one room, how God going to expand what you he's giving, I'm telling you, when I started, I was on Saturday and Sunday. I had 2 air shifts, Saturday and Sunday. And I fully believe I maximized what I could do on Saturday and Sunday. And God made the necessary moves to say, all right, here's 5 more shifts. So now I'm on Monday through Sunday. You know what I mean? And so if we utilize the favor that he has on us where he places us in that season, he's going to elevate us to levels that we never thought.
Hey, that's, man. Y'all see, y'all know how I do. I always sit here and I like noting these things. Just so it gets in, because I remember everything that's said in these conversations. But that, you have right-sized assignment territory. It's right-sized, meaning the space that you're in is what's necessary. And then as you are growing and outgrow that space, God will expand it where he sees that you can handle and do more and multiply more with what you've been given. Yeah. Y'all, this is... Man, I always I love these conversations. Every conversation seems like just there's going to be part 2s and 3s. this is my brother from another, man, because this is such wisdom that is timely wisdom. Because I think that people's world's been turned upside down. I think their views of what they should do, perhaps it's expanded. And so because now you're going to be applying and reimagining your work, your relationship to your family, and all these things, that you need to have a healthy framework to understand what God may call you to do in a season, what it's all for, why you should be doing it. I just think that we have to kind of rewash our thinking, our lenses around work, and our purpose in life. Because I think there are a lot of people who are depressed on the other side of purpose and feeling lost. But I think there's something beautiful about not knowing, but recognize there's one who does know. I have to leave you this, brother. What is your rhythm with God now? And as someone who's like married, you work, you wear multiple hats. What does your rhythm with God look like now? Because I think that's going to speak to people as they are thinking about just like how to kind of be in better rhythm in this season of life.
Yeah. Just using the rhythm imagery, like God is the first beat. Like when I press play every morning by waking up, like my mind's on him first. I wake up. Yes, I wake up next to my wife. I wake up knowing I have, 10 things on the schedule. But if I don't acknowledge him first, all that's going to go off beat.
Damn.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, I've seen it. Like, I've gone throughout my day where I've forgotten to get up and acknowledge God and ask him to be with me throughout my day. And I've seen my day go crazy, and me sitting down thinking, what in the world is going on today? And then I have to think like, yo, you ain't spent no time with God today. And then now, like, I am intentional, and some days is more than others. Like some days I can get it in, for a couple hours before I have to get to it. And then other days it's like, I got this 10, 15 minute window, or I'll do it while I'm getting everything together. But there's cannot be a day that I start off without saying thank you. And acknowledging that it was not me who kept me through my sleep, or the alarm clock it wasn't the alarm clock that woke me up this morning. Somebody's alarm clock went off and it's still going off and they not up. So the fact that he said it was okay for me to get up means I have another day of serving that I need to do, and the job's not done.
Couldn't close in any better way. My brother, son of God, Alan, I'm grateful, man, for this time. Like I said, we brothers, we gonna have a good time offline, man. But I'm thankful for you kind of dropping wisdom. I think that's timely wisdom. I do think that there needs to be a renewal of minds, beyond even what Romans said, but including, certainly including, that is necessary at this time. But also a reorientation around service, a return to service in our work, a return to that. It may not mean our titles change, our roles may change, but that our mindset changes towards what it's all for. I think that's a message for me, a message for you, a message for everybody, and I thank you for it. So, brother, man, I'm so thankful for you. How do people find you, man? And what do you have that's ahead that people could co-labor with you on, support you in? You know what I mean? So what you got going on ahead? How can people find you?
Yeah. So everyone, I'm online. You can find me at the Alan Stowe, TheAllenStowe. Everything on every platform is that. Even my website is theallenstowe.com. Ahead, we talked a little bit offline. I don't know. I know I'm going to continue to serve on this platform, Joy 107.1, here in Columbus. I'm on 7 days a week, so there won't be a day that you will not hear my voice. And I know I do have one thing I do have planned, and hopefully, you know, God allows it to happen this year, is I do have my 4th book coming out. Usually I like to put it out my book's out in April. But that didn't happen this year for, you know, some other things that God is doing in my life. I'm going to be testing to get my elder's license here in a couple of weeks. So God has not allowed me to see beyond that, and I'm just excited for what he has in store. So as soon as I know,
brother, man, in either case, man, we'll be with you along the way, man. Thank you so much, brother, for your service. Thank you so much for what you put out, you know, to encourage people on a daily basis, those who hear your voice or those who read it. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you, brother. So all respect to you, man. Salute, King. All right, man.
Sure,
thank you so much, man. Take care.